You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Hello listeners, we are back in all our glory, well honed from overeating and drinking and watching trash TV. Remember, we are the only nationalist news and any other is a mere imitation of the real thing. Two of our reporters, a Scouser who imports UK news, has a family illness and we wish him well. And our Euro expat reporter is still recovering from serious injury after a tussle with a French truck and is still sending in material. Thank you both and welcome back. These are the highlights of the news today, Monday, the 7th of January 2013. First private navy in the UK for 200 years has been set up. Armed Forces charity boss nicked a fortune. Illegal asylum seeker found after 7 years. Illegal immigrants riot and injure 5 UK border agency officers on Christmas Day. John Puxty talks about Sir Francis Drake. Centre Party faces internal rebellion in Sweden. French actor Depardieu in Russia to meet Putin. Bulletproof clothing for kids in the US. OIC slams Charlie Hebdo cartoon book. Thought for the day, honey, I'm home. And finally, 50 Shades of Boredom, but not in Surrey. UK news. The UK's first private navy in almost 200 years has been set up by a group of pioneering businessmen, former Marines and retired captains and soldiers to defend shipping off the coast of East Africa from the threat of pirates. They're frustrated at the inability of the Royal Navy, NATO, the European Union Naval Task Force and other navies to guarantee security for shipping in an area of ocean the size of North America. They can't do the job because they haven't got the budget, and deploying a £1 billion warship against 6 pirates with $500 worth of kit is not a very good use of the asset. Anthony Sharp, chief executive of Typhon, the company behind the venture, told the Times newspaper. Armed Forces charity boss nicked a fortune. From Epping, an Armed Forces charity chief has been jailed for stealing £43,000 to fund his online gambling addiction. Former soldier Omar bin Basilar, 55, plundered the cash from the Regular Forces Employment Association, which helps servicemen and women find work once they leave the forces. He faked 58 invoices to siphon the cash out of the charity and into a specially set up account to hide the money. Finance Director bin Basilar said he turned to gambling after his job became increasingly stressful and demanding. A failed asylum seeker has been finally caught after 7 years. An asylum seeker from Africa was finally caught by accident after his 4-year-old daughter was found wandering the streets of Britain in a pair of pyjamas. The man, who cannot be named for legal reasons, came into the UK in 2004 from Burundi and promptly made claim for asylum. He had been looking after the child while its mother was out working, fell asleep after he went for a smoke and a drink in the garage, and the child wandered off. When police returned the child, he gave them a different name from his work permit sheet and the police arrested him. The man with 2 names had a false passport which had been made from a stolen one. Reading Crown Court sentenced him to 26 weeks and gave an extra 2 weeks for neglect of a child. Although on the run and working illegally in Britain, he may have the right to stay in this country because of his rights to a family life by the Human Rights Act, owing to him fathering a child. A World at 8 spokesperson commented, "We seem to think in this country that we are dealing in a humane way with damaged people. Most of these migrants are extremely clever in manipulating the system and know exactly what to fill in and where to go in order to stay or be lost. We in the UK should up our game before we are totally overrun and going for broke." Illegal immigrants riot and injure 5 UK border agency officers. Illegal immigrants detained at Morton Hall in Lincolnshire have rioted and injured 5 border agency officers on Christmas Day. Around 40 detainees who were to be removed suddenly rioted. One of the detainees was injured and 12 were taken to other detention centres. Officials at the detention centre said that they will not put up with this sort of behaviour in future. Moreton Hall was once a women's prison until it was given a £6 million overhaul to turn it into a secure removal centre for illegals and illegal criminals to be detained before being booted back from whence they came. One newspaper reports that there are enough illegal immigrants to fill the size of Newcastle 3 times over. I hand you over now to John Puxty for his talk on Sir Francis Drake.
Francis Drake, adventurer, politician, fleet admiral. Drake was born in Tavistock in Devon in 1540. He was the eldest of 12 children. At the age of 9, his family moved to Kent, where his father was ordained a deacon and made vicar on the Medway, ministering to men in the King's Navy. At the age of 10, Francis Drake was apprenticed to a 3-masted bark that carried goods to and from France. Drake was a conscientious pupil and worked hard, so much so that the owner of the bark bequeathed the ship to him as if Drake was his own son. At 23, Drake sailed with John Hawkins, a cousin, to the New World on one of a fleet of ships owned by the Hawkins family of Plymouth. In 1568 they were both attacked by the Spanish in the West Indies, but managed to escape. In 1572, Drake attacked Panama, capturing the town of Nombre de Dios with lots of gold and silver treasure. A year later, he captured 20 tons of treasure, some of which he buried, and some he took to his ship. But the ship had gone. He made a raft and followed the coast until he found his ship, and then sailed for Plymouth with lots of treasure. In 1577, he set out to attack the Spanish in South America, and after an eventful voyage with several mishaps, gained the Pacific a year later. With only the Pelican left of his fleet, now renamed the Golden Hind, he attacked and sacked Valparaiso, later capturing a treasure ship on its way to Manila with 80 pounds of gold and 26 tons of silver on board. In 1580, the Golden Hind sailed into Plymouth with Drake and 59 men on board. The ship was loaded with treasure and spices. Half the cargo went to Queen Elizabeth I and was worth more than all the other income she had that year. The Queen knighted Drake in 1581. Drake was elected an MP 3 times and purchased Buckland Abbey near Yelverton in Devon. He attacked the Spanish several more times and was second in command of the English fleet that defeated the Spanish Armada.
Thank you, John. European news. Sweden, Centre Party faces internal rebellion. Resistance is growing within the ranks of the Centre Party over a radical new party programme which includes proposals on free immigration, polygamy and an end to compulsory schooling. Several regional party chapters in southern Sweden are now organising against the proposed 2013 party programme, reports the newspaper Dagens Nyheter. In December, leading Centre Party members in the southern region of Skåne said they were planning to draft a counter-proposal ahead of the party convention in March. They claim that the proposed programme shows that there is a great rift between a neoliberal Stockholm centre and the classic core voters in rural areas. But opinions are split in Stockholm too. There was a crisis even before this proposal came. Where is the support for polygamy, said Hans Lindqvist, a Stockholm County Council politician. I have a hard time seeing that anyone will be against it in the Stockholm region, said Centre Party MP Fredrik Federley. French actor Depardieu in Russia to meet Putin. French film star Gerard Depardieu arrived in Russia on Saturday to meet President Vladimir Putin, who granted him citizenship after a public spat in France over his efforts to avoid a potential 75% income tax. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the two would meet at the Black Sea resort of Sochi, where Putin was spending part of the 10-year New Year and Russian Orthodox Christmas holiday. He said it was possible Putin would hand Depardieu his Russian passport during the meeting. It is a private meeting, so we'll not be releasing any other details, Peskov said by phone. Russian media quoted him as saying the meeting would take place on Saturday. Depardieu's spokesman could not immediately be reached for comment. World news. Bulletproof clothing for kids. Miguel Calabero has developed bulletproof clothing to protect children from shooting sprees, and the US is his main market. The designer hopes to sell his collection to parents who fear for their children's safety. Violence, death and murder are a normal part of day-to-day life for a creative businessman with factories in Mexico and Colombia. Both countries are flashpoints in the Latin American drug war. Some call his choice of locations macabre, others business-minded. The US is where the market is for children's products, he says. They have their own problems there. And the Colombian designer Caballero believes he has the solutions. They're called V-Bag, Puffer Kids, T-Shirt Kids and Safety Vest, and they're meant to protect children from the kind of attacks that happened recently in Newton, Connecticut. The kids' T-shirt, for example, is constructed of a highly modern, bulletproof polymeric fibres. They're supposed to be able to withstand the heaviest of bullets. The T-shirt is light and can be worn inconspicuously as an undershirt. With Caballero's shirts, blouses and jackets, the children have at least a small chance of survival, the designer says. A nationalist spokesperson stated, "It is sad in this day and age we need something like this, but anything that protects children is a good product. We just hope that the price does not put it out of range for children of poor families." Don't go to Syria to fight, warns Carr. Australian Foreign Minister Bob Carr says he doesn't believe the war in Syria will lead to tensions within Australia's ethnic communities. Members of non-English speaking communities have reportedly been amongst more than 100 Australians believed to have travelled to Syria to fight in the conflict, born of an anti-government uprising in 2011. Senator Carr says he cannot comment on Australian Federal Police investigations into Australians who may have engaged in combat in Syria and warns that doing so breaks Australian law. But he says he's confident members of migrant communities understand why they shouldn't participate in the Syrian conflict. "We're in Australia. Common sense prevails. People understand that this is not a dispute for Australians to take up arms about. What we say, and this is our multiculturalism that we value so highly, is that we expect your loyalties to be to Australia and Australian interests. You can be proud of your heritage, but your loyalty has to be to Australia, and if that's your position, taking arms in the Syrian civil war is wrong." OIC slams Charlie Hebdo cartoon book. As expected, the exploding heads of the OIC, Organisation of Islamic Cooperation, have slammed the latest Charlie Hebdo cartoon book which mocks the paedophile Prophet Muhammad. Surprisingly, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney has not yet come out to express how disgusted Barack Hussein Obama is by the offensive depictions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. The Obama regime's criticism of the famous French magazine Charlie Hebdo followed the administration's effort to persuade Google to take down a short and cheap satirical video on YouTube that also angered Islamofascists. OIC General Secretary Ekmeleden Aysenoglu expressed concern at the publication of the comic book series on the life of Prophet Muhammad, saying it incites hatred and intolerance against Muslims. Aysenoglu said that the publication went against the norms of responsible journalism and was tantamount to abuse to the right of freedom and expression. He added that incitement and advocacy of hatred and intolerance on religious grounds signified by this publication was in contravention of international human rights laws and instruments. He called on the magazine to abide by the provisions, particularly those in the European Union context, on incitement to hatred and violence. He urged authorities in France to take appropriate action against the magazine. Aysenoglu reiterated the OIC's principled position on developing an international consensus on dealing with the frequency of deliberate acts of incitement within the framework of the Human Rights Council Resolution 1618, which in other words is tantamount to making freedom of expression an international crime. Thought for the day. Honey, I'm home. Well, here I am back for 2013. Another year in which the great British media will pulverise the truth and hype the inevitable. I know the message of a successful politician is always a positive message, so thus I will never be a proper politician, because I believe that people should have the plain, unvarnished truth, even though it may be coloured by my thoughts and ethos, but truth it is. If sheeples receive a message of positive lies, they react much better to it, even going to the extent of believing it and living their lives around it. If the message is nearer the unpalatable truth, they promptly turn off or create their own little world, which is what we do in this country and take to extreme measures, even ignoring local changes, let alone national ones, whilst firmly setting our eyes into tunnel vision. The subject of immigration is always close to my heart, because that, more than anything else, is the reason why we are losing our country and our culture, what is left of it, and the basis of the ongoing and crushing wave of migration is encapsulated in the media approach to covering this subject, and by the word cover I mean practically erase. A programme on ITV last Friday had me howling at the moon as this complex problem was aired under the title of "Is Britain Overcrowded?" Well yes, according to stats, by the year 2050 there will be 80 million of us. Well, not really us, but all the world's dross living on this small island. So the media portray it as a problem brought on by us, concerning us only, all wrong, but the sheeples will believe it. The presenter was the usual blank-faced smiling idiot who obviously had drunk deeply from the cup of the School of Common Purpose, and the ethnicities of the masses involved were skirted over and totally ignored, except when they showed the first birth of the new year, which was of course to an Indian woman who gave birth to her third child and, grinning like a hyena, said it would be her last. Had it been up to me, matey, you would not be here, as it was clear you were not married to a brain surgeon or any of the upmarket professionals we apparently will be needing in the future. The problems that our island in the future will be facing were put down to fertility, migration and longevity, in that order. Of course, this is our fertility, not wanted, our longevity, not needed, and ethnic migration you must accommodate more to survive the previous two problems. The problem being, of course, for the social engineers and genocide merchants within our establishment, that we indigenous Brits are here at all, and they will, like the Daleks, exterminate us in the name of a progressive and diverse society. So this is the truth. Take it, absorb it and memorise it, and understand that whatever happens in this country from now on will not be for your benefit in the long run, or even the short run, but the reasons given will be oh so reasonable and will make you feel a better person whilst Rome will be literally burning. On this programme there was a guy called Simon Ross, who was probably the most honest of this bunch of paid hypocrites, who said unless changes were made we would be overwhelmed and overcrowded, although he didn't stress with whom or what. Jonathan Porters from some sort of National Institute proved the main man, and what a sight he was, all lisps and transatlantic accent, and had clearly swallowed the entire library of common purpose and diversity bills for breakfast. He was in favour of building all over Britain, as he stated that over 90% of England was not built up enough, and we should welcome more immigration because stats have shown that migrants contribute more to our services than they take out, and we need highly qualified workers to pay and look after our elderly who are also on the increase. Now if you see a highly qualified ethnic surgeon, doctor or lawyer actually wiping my old fat white arse in the future, please let me know. In fact, by the year 2050 dementia sufferers will have doubled, a quarter increase in breast cancer of over 50s by 2040, and strokes will have increased by 20%. Now put this with the increase of 700,000 births and by my reckoning our elderly suffering those diseases will be dead, and the migrant population will be paying for its own elderly, which is perhaps the plan. So not really much of a case for bringing yet more migrants importers, is there? It is well known that most migrants do not contribute in any way to our society. They do not want to integrate, and their money, if they earn it, it goes out of the country. As to looking after our elderly in the future, frankly they haven't done much of a job up to now, so I'd rather take my chances with my own tribe in that regard, if there are any left by then. Also, Porters, there's a well-known evidence of people flying into Britain on a weekly basis to collect benefits for children not even here, and flying back. So what was that about migrant input? Education was a woozy as well. They interviewed the limp and empty head teacher of the biggest primary school in England, which is of course Gascoigne Primary in Barking, East London, and if you wanted to see the state of our formerly great education system, look no further. Masses of dreadlocks, scarves and brown and black faces everywhere. Indeed the whole of the third world seems present, and of course we, the poor bloody British, are running out of playing fields and schools for the little bastards. What do they expect? Many of their own countries clearly do not even provide fresh water for their own people. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that anyone, anywhere, has an inherent right to clean water. But if foreign aid money has been provided to their governments for that, what the hell are they all doing coming over here and expecting us, the sheeples, to provide money and education for them? Because that is what this is. This is the beggaring of us Brits to provide manna for all comers and their offspring for perpetuity in our country. In fact, we will need 800,000 new primary school places to keep up with the migrant births, let alone our own population in the future. By the time some bloody woman from the Association of Architects had decided that we need to build bigger and better houses for the bastards, I was in extremis and needed the last rites. Some poor white couple had bought a flat in Liverpool, which was okay for a couple of vertically challenged persona, and any hopes they had of adding to the population boom was knackered, as they had to even keep their Hoover at his parents' house. So no wonderful 4-bedroom council funded home for them of course. No being put to the top of the list because they'd just flown in or crawled in with their entire tribe from God knows where, and no home being provided by the parents, who obviously had failed to amass a fortune from drugs, thievery and prostitution during their sojourn in this country, or indeed another country. So poor Matt and Miriam will not be adding to any baby stats in our future. Interestingly enough, the last rites having been administered in the form of a large whisky, the subject turned to areas that have an unprecedented expanding population growth in England. And you'll never guess where. They are Tower Hamlets, Hounslow, Hackney, Newham, Greenwich, Waltham Forest, Manchester, Leicester, Milton Keynes and Peterborough. Now I bet you didn't even know that, did you? They also tie up with the Muslim population growth as well. Now tie this to the areas in Britain that do not have a population growth. In fact, our population is sliding downhill in these areas, and they are Barrow-in-Furness, where the hell is that? Sefton, Knowsley, Sunderland, South Tyneside, Burnley, West Somerset, Redcar and Cleveland, Middlesbrough and my old stamping ground, Kensington and Chelsea. Our old friend Porter's, or Proctor Settle, a well-known pile ointment as he shall be known, picked Burnley out as an area which is regenerating itself with a large electrical parts company. Well done, just don't sell it to the sodding Chinese like our London taxi firms. Of course the tie-up with the overpopulated areas full of migrants and the underpopulated areas which are more like England was even 2 decades ago surely didn't fool the watchers into thinking we're all doing this by ourselves. Clearly the point being avoided was that in order to accommodate even further numbers of immigrants, our government and councils will have to take steps which surely will undermine us Brits and Britain even more so in the future. We will have to build on all land, especially in areas not overpopulated by ethnic minorities, to encourage them to go there and breed. Watch out Kensington. Take over all the old commercial and industrial sites, put out of business by shifting manufacturing and work to the east, and make every effort to set up new primary schools for the children of people from those countries so they can learn English eventually and take our jobs over here. Build huge new airports and stations to accommodate the working migrants, those of course who aren't wiping our old arses or on benefits or running the family businesses. Build new maternity wards to accommodate the huge rise in ethnic births, because most of these women, although used to giving birth at the side of a road, will require greater attention than ours because of their genetic birth and health complications. Ignore the 2 million couples on the housing lists and lose them. Give all the new housing over to diverse families living the progressive dream, and make every effort to ensure their well-being as workers for the future. Make homosexuality an affirmative action and only give jobs, houses and publicity to those who prefer this lifestyle. Even better, make it a mixed race partnership and non-Christian, and your house will be huge. So here we are, sitting around in 2025. You see, I told you I'd tell you the truth. All stats should be halved for years but quadrupled for numbers. In a one up, one down, dominated by a huge telly, no garden, no pets, no money, just plastic cards, and they are only issued if you are a one-legged black lesbian who has adopted tons of multiracial babies, or you're on the local council. Your children will be being brought up by the huge collective primary down the road and hardly see you, and you will be by yourself, because us whites are not encouraged to have partners of the opposite sex. Our babies are bred in test tubes to outbreed the white gene and counteract inherent racism, and we will be too fat on takeaways to go out and socialise, and the repeated calls to prayer from the Islamic towers on every street corner drown the Sharia TV anyway. Just joking, or is this Proctor Settle's dream? The way we handle positive and negative messages has been drummed into us from an early age since the last World War. In previous times, negative messengers were killed, but affirmative action was taken on that message. Now negative messages are actively discouraged and replaced with positive lies. And people faced with positive lies in a world increasingly becoming rather negative prefer the lies. So do governments and the state. Because if people perceive they have nothing to fear or fight for, they will not. They will just accept and accommodate. And that is the subliminal message, my friends. Accept and accommodate. Accept and accommodate. I and the British National Party will not accept and not accommodate, even to our detriment politically. No surrender is my motto for 2013. Our sheeples may prefer to ignore us or malign us, but I believe, despite the media, our sheeples are also thinking more like us, even if they do not want to. Because their world will not become a positive lie, but a negative reality, only too soon. And finally, how 50 Shades of Grey set Pulse's rating in the libraries of Surrey. Well, you heard it here first, not. People in leafy Surrey, my old county residence, have set a record for taking out this steamy trilogy from their libraries. Surrey residents now account for 1/5 of all library borrowing of E. L. James' 50 Shades of Grey. Well, although pushed onto the tables in Hampshire libraries, they didn't do as well, probably because we do not do sex in Hampshire as it frightens the horses. It is apparently the best-selling book in Britain since records began, but why? I found it boring and repetitive, and I'm clearly not an S&M merchant. But I could be put to it. I can think of several people I would love to thrash personally, though not in a good way. The funniest readings of the first book was on a programme wrongly called the 50th Funniest Moments on TV, all presented by leftist, mirthless, liberal wankers who are obviously anti-right, anti-life, anti-British, anti-monarchy and anti-white. But their readings of sections of this book had me bent double laughing. I've never known a woman to have her thighs permanently pinned by a bloke's pelvis. Seems a bit odd to me. I don't think I've seen anyone take the great British public for such a ride in such a way since the J.K. Rowling books, but at least one hopes they were not personal experiences. They should be called 50 Shades of Boredom and more to come, literally. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.